Right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It has gone 6 o'clock and we are now live streaming, so I will begin the meeting. Welcome everyone to the meeting of this evening's Cabinet. Agenda item number 1 is the evacuation procedure, and as there are members of the public present, I will read it out. A fire drill is not expected, so if the alarm sounds, please evacuate the building quickly and calmly. Please use the stairs and do not use the lifts. Once out of the building, please gather outside Lloyds Bank or Yorkshire Bank, whichever one it is now, on the opposite side of the road. Exit by the door by which you entered the room or by the fire exits, which are clearly indicated by the standard green fire exit signs. If you do need any assistance in evacuating the building, please make yourself known to a member of staff. Please also make sure all your mobile phones are turned off or set to silent. I would also advise that all or part of the meeting will be recorded for future broadcast, and indeed it is live at the moment on our YouTube channel. That brings us on to agenda item number 2, which is apologies, and I have apologies from Councillor Golby. Agenda item number 3 is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest which are not printed on the agenda? No, in which case we will take them as read. Agenda item number 4 is the minutes. Is everyone happy that I sign them off as a true and accurate record of the last meeting? Okay. Thank you. Okay, that moves us on to agenda item number 5, which is public consultation. I've been made aware that we have speakers on agenda item number 6, which is expressions of interest for the Bedworth Civic Hall. I have Mr. Margrave, Jean Newitt, there's a statement to be read out, Bradley Ellis, statement to be read out if he isn't present, Daniel Bromwich, Joanne Browning is a statement, Ruth Ison, we didn't have her down as attending yet. Is Mrs. Ison here yet? No. Okay. Wendy Snell, Rachel Hardy, and Stephen Young is a statement to read out as well. I also have a speaker on agenda item number 13, which is the Q2 Treasury Management Report Mid-Year Review, and that is Mr. Peter Smith. I will take the agenda items in the order that they are printed. Okay, so that moves us on to agenda item number 6, which is expressions of interest at Bedworth Civic Hall. Councillor Markham.
Thank you, Chair. This report seeks Cabinet's approval for the Council to seek expressions of interest from suitable interested parties for the potential future operation and management of the Bedworth Civic Hall. Following the early termination of the Coventry Warwickshire Partnership Trust's licence at the end of October 22 to use the Bedworth Civic Hall as a vaccination site, Cabinet has had to consider the reopening of the Civic Hall site earlier than anticipated. Cabinet at its meeting on the 12th of October 22 decided that the Bedworth Civic Hall should not reopen at this time due to the resources and operational costs required to bring the facility back into operation. This is in the context of the significant strain already being placed upon Council's resources. The decision is currently subject to call-in by the Finance and Public Services Overview and Scrutiny Panel, which is to be heard next week on the 17th of November. At the Council meeting on the 19th of October, members also approved a question on this issue to be discussed at a future OSP meeting. This will also be dealt with on the 17th of November. Cabinet now needs to consider the options for the future of the Civic Hall. This report seeks to do that by recommending that the Council seek expression of interest from suitable interested parties who have the necessary skills, knowledge, experience and financial backing to submit a business case to operate the Civic Hall. Any suitable proposals will require no financial subsidy from the Council. In November 21, the Council commissioned a report from Strategic Ledger to consider the future options available for operating the Civic Hall following the pandemic and future investment requirements. The report is attached as Appendix A to this report. Appendix A also sets out several options, many of which require financial investment by the Council. Due to a lack of resources and the financial strain caused by operational costs, it has been determined that bringing the facility back into operation was not possible. There may, however, be options outside of the Council which should be considered. So I therefore ask that the Cabinet approves expression of interest to be sought from suitable interested parties for the potential future operation and the management of the Bedworth Civic Hall.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Markham. I will second that from the Chair, but I will also move a slight amendment to the papers in that the consultation period is to be extended until the 30th of January, taking into account that we do have the Christmas and New Year period, and I know that people would like to enjoy the festive period rather than have to be putting together business cases. So Cabinet have discussed this, and we do believe it is appropriate to extend to the 30th of January. That moves us on to our list of public speakers. Mr. Margrave.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm here today to ask the Cabinet to rethink their recommendation to put local people and our community before politics. I'm pleased the Council is looking for others to step in and run the Civic Hall and admitting that you aren't competent to do so. It's clear that you aren't up to the job, so why not let local people have a go? I'm asking you to support a community group to set up a charitable trust and also to ask for you to extend the consultation further than January. To be open and transparent, release the WhatsApp messages that I've seen and the emails. Stop having secret meetings or making decisions behind closed doors because it's undemocratic. To be honest, I need you to be honest with local people about the sketch the Council published because there is no plan and there is no money to pay for it. It will just end up as houses. I also have in my hand an application on behalf of local people and Civic Action to register the Civic Hall and the Arts Centre and other buildings as assets of community value, so that residents have a say on whether you knock them down and their future. In respect of the report, I'm concerned there's no equality impact assessment and there's no mention of the Arts Centre. We already know that disabled people have had to leave because you won't pay for the heating. Why didn't the consultants explore a community trust? And why wasn't this report shared with local people a year ago? Imagine what could have been achieved in 12 months by the local community with their talent, skills and passion. The council would be in a different place now with funding applied for and a plan to reopen. The Civic Hall has been a political football for decades, kicked from red to blue. Today, let's start to take the politics out of it. I'm not here as a politician. Those days are long gone. I'm here as someone from Bedworth who lives in Nuneaton, who works for community groups and wants the best for our borough. I've always argued for a community trust and a town council and will continue to. I'm angry that Bedworth isn't getting their fair share and want better. They need some money. They deserve money like Nuneaton gets for the museum. The council needs to commit to a community hub and investment in both towns on equal terms. We need the council to work with and serve the community that elected it. Let's end the politics, so I don't want responses in political language. Just answer the questions. And let's work together for a bold vision for Bedworth, because the council has a role to play here, and it's really important that you step up to the plate and work with the community to put forward a bid so we can save our building. The solution isn't to hand it over to a developer or to knock it down. I want you to level up Bedworth, not knock it down. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any points of clarification for Mr. Margrave? No. Jean Newitt, that's a statement, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. Dear Councillors, in considering the decision to invite expressions of interest, are you able to inform the public today and anyone potentially interested if there was a clause in the contract with the NHS that stated they would make good any wear and tear to the floor and stage? If so, would they honour this? Circa £750,000 has been quoted to replace obsolete boilers. Who quoted these figures? Did the Council obtain 3 quotes? as they are presently seen to be still working, is there an immediate need for their replacement? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. That moves us on to Bradley Ellis. Is Bradley Ellis present? No, in which case we have a statement from him.
Thank you, Chair. We have collected 503 petition signatures in Bedworth Town Centre from the residents of Bedworth. Many other local people have created their own petitions and Facebook action groups. In total, as of today's date, there have been at least 3,500 residents of Bedworth requesting to save the Civic Hall. We emailed Jackie Padbury on the 8th of November to request the Civic Hall be listed as a community asset as allowed under the Localism Act 2011. Could the Cabinet make a statement regarding community assets in Nuneaton and Bedworth, specifically how many assets are currently on the list, and if the Civic Hall is already on it, or will it be put on the list in the future? The Civic Hall is a public building and was built when the local it predates the Local Government Act 1972 came into force. The Civic Hall also predates Bedworth entering into the NBBC partnership with Nuneaton in 1974. The Nuneaton and Bedworth District Council was created on the 1st of April 1974. Does the Civic Hall come under the purview of NBBC as it was built before NBBC existed? The general consensus is it would be much cheaper to improve and revitalise the building as opposed to demolishing it and then rebuilding a smaller size Civic Hall. Funding would be needed for a future Civic Hall as envisioned by the Transforming Bedworth plans, with an initial council estimate of £30 million to rebuild. This funding could be cut to 80%, just £6 million required, if the council switched the idea of destroy and rebuild to revitalise. £2 million allocated to improvements and making the building utility costs self-sustainable via a new solar panel, solar air heating system, and the introduction of a larger food and drink offering space. £4 million allocated to a 10-year arts and entertainment Civic Hall growth fund to be used to create a self-sustaining, revenue-positive Civic Hall. This would save the public £24 million, would be easier and quicker. With a little imagination and enthusiasm, this could be used to quickly invigorate the arts and entertainment scene in Bedworth. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Daniel Bromwich.
The Civic Hall is a community venue. It is the biggest in the local area, and if run for the local community, by the local community, then it has the potential to be a great community asset. Why would you spend £500,000 demolishing a building when you can use it for a community venue? It has great spaces that can be used for great activities. You don't need regeneration, you just need to revitalise Nuneaton and Bedworth, but not forgetting the Bedworth. This venue needs to be saved and given to the community for community use. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bromwich. We have a statement from Joanne Browning.
Thank you, Chair. Last week it came into the public domain that a report was commissioned in November 2021 on the viability of the Civic Hall. Councillor Kyle Evans was responsible for the Civic Hall in his portfolio until December 21, in which he resigned from soon after. Did he choose to resign after the finding of this report was to ultimately close the Civic Hall, and yet leaflets were still printed with the manifesto promise of the Civic Hall wasn't closing in May? There are Bedworth councillors I've spoken to that are horrified they falsely campaigned on this promise as they were unaware of secret deals and meetings they were unaware of. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. I have Ruth Ison down next. No? There was no email actually received directly to the council, so I can't allow that under the rules, I'm afraid. Okay. Wendy Snell.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. At the Cabinet meeting on the 12th of October, I asked you specifically if there'd ever been any Arts Council funding applied for for the Civic Hall, and you said there had been and it had been refused. So I subsequently asked for a Freedom of Information request, which only arrived today. Apparently that was never the case. It was only an expression of interest, which was never taken to full application. So I'm disappointed that you actually sat there and told me it had been an application for funding. The only mention I can see of the Civic Hall of any funding at all is in your levelling up document, where there's a one-line mention of the Civic Hall asking for £150,000 for a feasibility study. And there the Civic Hall is described as struggling. Now, that's negative in every aspect. So I'd welcome your answers on that, please, Councillor Wilson, because that's what you told me on the 12th of October. Thank you.
And I stand by that answer. If we didn't submit the EOI, then we couldn't submit a formal application. We weren't invited through the EOI, so we could not submit a further application. They would only invite interested parties who passed the EOI stage. Without that, we couldn't get through. So we did make an application to try and seek further funding, but it was a two-stage process. If we couldn't do that, then there was no other funding. And I do believe it is a fair representation to say that the Civic Hall was struggling. It's losing £845,000 a year. By any definition, I would say that is struggling. Sorry, I've answered your questions. I'm not taking anything further. No, you've finished. I'm sorry, you finished your statement. I've answered your questions. That's it.
Then you've given me wrong information in your document that you sent to me this morning, but you didn't give me all the information.
Well, I'm not responsible directly for that, and I'll ask officers to investigate that.
Thank you.
I don't write every single piece of literature which comes out of this authority.
I take this as a collection of councillors.
We then move on to... There's just an update on that. So Ruth Ison hasn't attended. She did send a statement, but she didn't ask for it to be read out. That's what I've just been informed by the Chief Executive. Okay. Rachel Hardy. Is Rachel Hardy here? Yeah, okay.
I am. Good evening, councillors. Whilst it is welcome that the council are looking to invite expressions of interest, this report does raise a number of important questions that the Cabinet need to answer today. Why were expressions of interest not asked for a year ago? The report was dated November 2021. Will the council be offering any support to the community to help and assist put together a business plan and to apply for external funding? What is the criteria and definition of suitable interest? Will the council be opening up the Civic Hall for interested parties to make a site visit? Will the council hand over the building to a community group, or will it charge rent as it does with Nuneaton Abbey Theatre? When the £800,000 allocated previously for works, or where has the £800,000 allocated previously for works, or the income from the NHS gone? Will this be made available to a bidder? Are you able to share with us the council's plans for the arts centre, the car park, library and Spitalfields accommodation? As there is no mention of this in the recommendation. Another point of sort of things that I've read about ticket sales and things, the Civic Hall has hosted numerous events such as darts events where they've sold 300 tickets. Doesn't mean that the event has been unsuccessful or not profitable. So I think putting it onto ticket sales only is not ideal. And just as a final point, this is an asset to the community, Nuneaton and Bedworth. There are many people's careers that have developed from the use of this community asset as young people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I was just checking because what you'd submitted if you hadn't attended was virtually word for word what was going to be submitted by Stephen Young. So if you had read that word for word, I wasn't going to get the chief exec to read out Mr. Young's. Okay, because it would just have been duplication. So, in which case we'll move on to Mr. Young's statement.
Thank you, Chair. The Council has said that any plans have to be at no cost to them, but millions has been spent in Nuneaton on a hotel, and every year the museum costs nearly £500,000. Surely the Council should make a grant available to those running the Civic Hall to match the money it spends in Nuneaton. On the issue of costs, it has been reported by the Council that the demolition of just the Civic Hall would cost £600,000 alone. Never mind the Arts Centre and buying up people in action. Will the Council make that money available to invest and protect the future of the Civic Hall? As the community, we relish the chance to set up a community trust and run the Civic Hall in the interests of Nuneaton and the Bedworth residents, but we need to know a few things first. What equipment is in the Civic Hall, and will that also be transferred to the people who run the venue? Will the group also get the Arts Centre? It seems the bar has actually previously made a profit, and a lot of the current costs of the Civic Hall seem to be recharges. Is the Council able to give more detail about the costs the Civic Hall incurs and provide fully detailed accounts and ledgers? Finally, in other areas, councils have helped residents form a community trust, write a business plan and apply for external or match funding. What are Bedworth and Nuneaton councillors planning on doing to help local people apply to run and improve the Civic Hall? Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you very much. Anything that officers wish to come back on from any of that? Okay. In which case, I'll open it up to not. Hang on, let me just check what committee services have received. Bear with me a moment. Sorry, what's your name, madam? Right. When officers received your letter, they interpreted it as a letter to myself and Councillor Markham. Hang on, Mrs. Batterby, let me just answer the point, please. Let me just answer the point. They interpreted it as a letter for us to reply to outside of this, and I know that I've already corresponded with you on this, but seeing as I have seen that email and it was a misinterpretation, then I'm happy for you to give a statement.
Council and members, I assume that our council believe that access to the arts is important for a healthy and vibrant community, and that local theatres, art galleries and such like have a value for society. We're told that our Civic Hall now requires significant investment. This cannot have happened suddenly, so surely the council should have taken action sooner, instead of waiting until the last minute. Maybe NBBC could even have borrowed some money whilst it was at low interest. At the very least, the community should have been informed, and then maybe we could have worked together to save it. Maybe we could have got Arts Council funding. That seems to have been available to Stratford-on-Avon, whose MP has proclaimed their recent award to be levelling up money, I believe. Bedworth needs some levelling up. So come on, councillors, let's see what we can do when we work together to save our Civic Hall, please. Thank you.
In light of the fact that you have read your statement, I won't be replying direct to the email. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Mrs. Batterby. There are no other public speakers. I'm sorry, you didn't indicate before the meeting had started. So I'm... What's your name, sir? I'm sorry, Mr. Calvert, but in order to be fair to everyone, if member services haven't received it, I'm not going to allow you to speak tonight. If there is an issue about the email addresses or anything, you can take that up with officers at a later stage. Any non-cabinet member? Councillor Condacor.
Thank you, Chair. It is really disappointing that we haven't made more progress a year ago on letting the community bid. There's been a lot of dodgy numbers put around and lots of useful information put around, all mixed together. At the Cabinet meeting and the Council meeting, we keep hearing about this 29,000 figure, which is in the report in your annex here. That seems to actually miss out everyone who went to the pantomime. 11,500 people were missed from the calculation. And I believe that also missing from the calculation were ticket sales sold by the proprietors of events. So if you book a civic hall for snooker or play and you sell the tickets rather than through the box office, that wasn't in the consultant's report. So that's a massive error. It might be as many as 49,000 people visited the civic hall in a year when the Borough Council's report by their swimming pool consultants said it was 29,000. That's a massive error. I'm very disappointed that the data on the boilers was only sent to me at lunchtime today. There are 8 boilers in the Civic Hall, 3 of which need urgent replacement. They were actually 40 years old. The council should have been using some of that capital charges. So there's this magic money that councils charge to parts of the council for their capital to pay for the upkeep and the capital projects. That should be paying for replacing the boilers within 40 years. So there's been a history of underspending. So I hope the council will now accept that the building was never worth what it was on the books for all these capital charges because it wasn't doing the maintenance. And I hope it will actually look, when it goes out to these tenders, actually giving people all the information they need. There needs to be a meeting, a launch meeting where people are shown around the building, given plans, given details of the account so people can put a bid in. No one can put a bid in without knowing all the technical details of the building. And I do hope, actually, we don't set the aim, actually, it will cost us nothing. We spent £500,000 on the Civic Hall in real cash money. If we got that down to £250,000 being run by a community, I would say that's a success, and I would try and put it in our budget next year. Because trying to spend nothing on art is a ridiculously low figure. I understand why we can't spend £500,000 now, but setting the community a challenge of getting a business plan that will run the Civic Hall at zero cost, I think is a ridiculously high bar, particularly considering how much we're spending on other stuff. So I think we need to give the community a chance. We need to ask them how much they can run the Civic Hall for, rather than saying, please run it for zero. Because that Civic Hall, as says in your report, generates £7 in the community for everyone who visits. So if we got the visits back up to 50,000, we could be putting £500,000 into the Bedworth community, part of which will then come back through business rates, parking charges, etc. So we really do need to look at giving them a sensible target as a community of how much to actually it cost in terms of subsidy, because we'll get that back many times over in having a vibrant Bedworth town centre. And I am very concerned about the flow of information. I say there's 700,000 for boiler replacement to replace 3 boilers. Actually ends up being 15,000 to replace the boilers. All the 700,000 is actually all the pipe work and ripping out everything in the plant room and all. Yeah, the disparity is absolutely massive. Yeah, we need to get proper information to people. And I'm really shocked that this report that was done a year ago was done by our leisure contracting experts rather than the sort of people who actually do studies of theatres. There is a lot of opportunity here. We had 4 shows with comedians on at the Civic Hall. They took 50,000 in ticket sales for 4 nights. There is some serious money that could go into the community by once a month putting on a top comedian. A lot of the time it would be community shows, the panto at Christmas, which I keep saying, the panto is not in this report. How can you miss out the panto when studying the financial viability of Civic Hall, when it runs for a month, has 26 shows and takes in about £114,000? There's so much that needs to be done. And finally, Chair, I've been told this report cannot go to next week's scrutiny committee because it's considering the call-in and the question, but it can't call in, it can't have this report going to it. That's absolutely nuts. This report and the information I got on boilers, this is all information that should be going to next week's scrutiny meeting. It is not just a scrutiny meeting on a question or call-in form, it's a scrutiny meeting on the future of the Civic Hall. So it surely must have all this stuff going to next week's scrutiny and not be one of these things of that's in that silo, that's in that silo. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Condacore. Any points of clarification? No. Any other non-cabinet member? Mr Hollis, can I ask you to directly answer the points about the boilers and the ticket sales, please?
I can. Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, the boiler report will be included in the information for the OSP, so that has not been withheld. In terms of the ticket sales, Chair, and I'll make a statement at the OSP in terms of the presentation, that was a genuine error that was missed in terms of the figures, in terms of the anomalies for the pantomime, etc. That has been addressed and will again be put right for the OSP, and it will be put right in the report to detail there was 49,000 on that particular year, Chair. And in terms of the OSP, there will be a range of information, fully open and transparent in terms of the boiler breakdown and the costs. An independent advice note has been received by a professional experienced consultant engineer detailing the parameters of the boiler system at the Civic Hall and what needs to be done and is critical to move forward, along with an itemised list of the essential works that needs to take place for the Civic Hall to open, Chair, and that will all be available in the OSP report. Thank you.
I believe that's what Mr Hollis did say. That's correct, isn't it, Mr Hollis?
It is, Chair. It's 49,071, I think, to be exact, is the figures for the 2019-20 that we referred to. As I say, that was a genuine error by the consultant that didn't pick that up in the appendices, but that has been addressed and will be addressed in the amended report to reflect those figures for the OSP report, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. If people can just bear with me a moment, officers want to... Okay, Mr Calvert, unfortunately your email went into the junk mail. I've no idea why. As many councillors will tell you, there are a range of things which end up going in our junk mail. We can't control that. Under those circumstances, I will let you speak. Okay.
With the admission of the report was commissioned by the Conservatives before they, after they came into office, was this report placed on the CSW Jets portal to allow local consultants to bid for this report? Where was the budget for this report coming from? Then, within this report being submitted in November, wasn't it checked properly to make sure all local amenities were included? Because under page 20 of 5.1, competitor venues, we have here in Nuneaton Abbey, which was excluded. We have in Coventry, Albany, which has been excluded. And we have Garrick and Lichfield, which have been excluded, which are in the 30-mile parameter of this report. Also, the Warwick's Arts Centre weren't included. Three of those 4 venues that weren't included have been turned around with the help or transfer from council assets. After seeing the 2018-2019 figures and the 2019-20 accounts figures, with all the added in charges taken into account that MBC have added onto these accounts, the Civic Hall has made a loss. However, after speaking to several people, the Civic Hall produces annual reports which have shown, even in the last financial year, that it made in excess of £10,000 profit. So if the Civic Hall is making profits every single year prior to the addition of these charges, why and where are these charges being dreamt up from? And how can we actually find out what the actual figures are? Because several members of staff have actually stated that the figures provided by the Civic Hall to the council show that it makes a profit. In light of all this, how has the NBC decided that there is a suitable organisation to bid for this project? When will this criteria be laid out as a suitable project, bearing in mind that a councillor has stated that once the decision has been made, we will have to then submit bids to be recognised as a suitable bid. Now, these bid timetables start, according to the council website, that tomorrow morning through to the 9th of January. If there is going to be a period of choosing suitable organisations to bid, whether commercial or community-based projects, will this deadline be exceeded because it will eat into that time frame, and with Christmas and New Year it will make difficult opportunities to study all the documents and put in the right necessary visits that would be required. Finally, there is many assets within the building, including archives, diaries that date back 30-40 years of all entertainments that have taken place and events that are taking place. Will these be handed over to the winning bid or provided to...
Mr Carver, can you please wrap up? You've had your 3 minutes.
That was it. I was just going to say, would they be handed over to the library or would they be handed over to the winning organisation?
Thank you very much. Any points of clarification? No? Anything else officers wish to come back on?
Thank you, Chair. Just to refer to what you said earlier, is that the extended period has now gone to the 30th of January from the 9th of January. So it's just a further 3 weeks to compensate that we do take into consideration it is over the Christmas period. Thank you, Chair.
Does that also take into account, like, are you going to decide tonight who is going to be the type of organisation? Do we have to submit bids and
Mr Culver, you've had your say. You shouldn't be coming back in anymore. I will try and answer a number of points afterwards, okay? I do try and be as flexible as I can, and I gave a lot of flexibility at the last meeting. We spent over 2 hours on this at the last meeting, so I'll try and address a number of points which have come up, okay? So I made a number. I can't address all the points which have come up because there have been various different things which have been raised. But just to go down a list of the things that I've made a note of, community groups, which was raised by Mr Margrave. Anyone can bid. I'm not going to reserve it to a community group. I'm not going to reserve it to a business or any other type of group. Let's see who comes forward and who puts forward the best business plan to run the Civic Hall. Surely that is what is in everyone's interest, that it is the best delivery possible, regardless of whether it is community run, business run, whatever. I'm not going to exclude any particular field of expertise in that. If they do want to come forward as a community group and they are the best, as assessed independently by officers, then so be it. In terms of when those will be assessed, once the deadline has passed on the 30th of January, there will inevitably be a period where officers will have to assess those various different bids which have come in, assuming that bids have come in, and then a report will be brought forward to Cabinet if there is something there for us to look at to determine which bidder to award the contract to, if we can. I can't put a timeline on that because it will depend very much on how long it takes the officers to assess them. I would rather officers assess them properly than rush to a deadline of saying you've only got a week to do it, and it comes to the Cabinet the week after the 30th of January. In terms of fair share for Bedworth, I think residents, and particularly some of the more political activists, are forgetting a very, very big levelling up investment in Bedworth. There is going to be a new leisure centre for Bedworth, £34 million worth of investment in Bedworth, and I think that is a significant amount of money going there. If we hadn't to put that in, there would be no leisure centre for Bedworth because the current leisure centre is literally crumbling down in certain places. Indeed, a few years ago, if memory serves, part of the roof actually caved in and we had to replace part of that. It is past its useful shelf life. To go on, £5 million worth of that money, that £34 million, is due to come from 106 contributions from developments in the Arbury ward. That is a Nuneaton ward where the new residents would most likely use Nuneaton facilities, not Bedworth. And that we are in danger here of turning this into Bedworth versus Nuneaton. That isn't what this is about. But I would also put on record that when you look at the number of properties in Nuneaton and Bedworth, 27% of them are in Bedworth. The remaining percentage comes from Nuneaton and Bulkington. So that means that remaining percentage has also been paying in over all these years for the Civic Hall to continue. And I have to say, anyone who is trying to say that the Civic Hall has made a profit is quite frankly living in the clouds. It has never, ever made a profit. Never. If it had, we wouldn't be in this position in the first place. To address the recharges, if you look at the recharges, and they're in the budget books, the recharges are usually in the region of £200,000 to £250,000 or thereabouts. So even if you take those off the budgeted amounts, that still leaves over £600,000 on average per year that we have to find after all the income has been accounted for, after everyone's wages have been paid, after all the electricity and gas and heating and water has been paid. And a number of those recharges would still be directly attributable to the Civic Hall. For example, we have to have accountants to keep things going. Whilst there is a central accountancy team, part of that should be recharged to the Civic Hall because they use those facilities. So not all the recharges should be deliberately excluded, but we cannot unpick them to the minutest detail. 503 signatures on a petition, and I know that it's over 750 on another. I suspect most people have probably signed both. However, and that is their democratic right, but if those 503 people had used the Civic Hall on each and every single occasion, rather than the average of 330 odd per each, and it is an average, granted, but the average works out per year at 330 people attending, then we wouldn't be in the problem we're in. Even if you take that into account, it is still not at full capacity each and every single time. To address this fanciful pseudo-legal argument about the Local Government Act, it's a load of tosh about the Local Government Act 1972 and it belonging to the old Bedworth Urban District Council. The reality is that we, as Nuneaton and Bedworth Council, are the successor body to Bedworth Urban District Council. Therefore, it is an asset of this council, and it has been paid for since 1974 by all of the residents of Nuneaton and Bedworth. If you were to actually follow the logic of that argument, then there would have been no one to pay it at all since 1974, because we wouldn't have been able to pay it if it doesn't belong to us. So I won't have any truck with these fanciful pseudo-legal arguments. Assistance to anybody who wishes to come forwards. There are a number of issues with that. Directly, we could not provide that assistance. We do not have the officer capacity to do that. And also, it does raise an issue about independence when it comes to assessing any of the bids which come in. If they had assisted on 2, and there were 2 other bids which came in who didn't have the assistance, then whoever is the winning bidder could legitimately argue that they have had an unfair advantage if they had had assistance from the council, and that could put us in jeopardy legally with procurement rules. And I see the head of procurement nodding on that one. But there is assistance which is available from other bodies such as Carver, and they have assisted in other community groups bidding for these sorts of things before if they wish to do so. The NHS income, and I specifically asked this question of finance over the past week or so, and this year the NHS income, and I'm sure Ms Summerfield will correct me if I've got it wrong, but if I remember rightly, it was in the region of about £350,000 income this financial year, but that is still to be adjusted due to issues with the contract, the break clause, etc., and presumably any other minor issues that have to be ironed out as part of the contractual agreements. The reality is, with the NHS income that we have had, it has only reduced the loss we have made on the Civic Hall. It has still gone towards maintaining the Civic Hall, keeping the lights going, the heating going, the staffing that have had to be there, the cleaners that have had to be there, etc. So this suggestion, which has been going around on social media, propagated by certain parties, that there is this magical pot of money from the NHS income which could have saved the Civic Hall, it's a load of rubbish. It has just been there to pay the existing bills. In terms of the regeneration plans, what we have to remember is that the decision was purely about the reopening of the Civic Hall. Any potential regeneration is a separate decision. All we have put out at the moment is an indicative vision of what could be done in Bedworth Town Centre for regeneration. And I think they are actually exciting plans for regeneration. Bedworth residents keep saying, we're seeing everything going on in Nuneaton. Why aren't we getting any? The moment we actually put something out, there is a vocal minority who shoot down any attempt to regenerate Bedworth. And I think that's actually quite sad, that people don't have any vision, ambition or aspiration for Bedworth Town Centre. You might not like what has been put forwards, but you can't deny that actually for the first time there has been a vision. Mr Smith, please be quiet, you're not speaking on this item. That you can't deny that something has been put forwards. In terms of action sooner, we couldn't have done anything sooner because we didn't know until approximately 6 weeks, I think it's 6 weeks ago now, that the NHS were withdrawing from using the Civic Hall. We had planned, on the basis of information they gave us last December, I think it was, and what we had budgeted for, on the basis that they would keep using the Civic Hall until the end of this financial year. They gave us a month's notice and we had to react to that. In terms of answering about borrowing, we can't just, this isn't like central government just being able to borrow to keep day-to-day funding going. We can't do that. Our revenue budget, we have to have, by law, a balanced budget every year. So for every pound we spend, we have to generate or save. We cannot go to the bank and say, we're £50,000 short this year, will you give us £50,000? We can only borrow for capital projects if and when there is a viable capital project to go. So, for example, if you take the leisure centre, which we are doing work on, all the preliminary work which was done on that had to be categorised as revenue until such point as there was a capital project to move on, and then we could reallocate that money to capital projects in terms of the budget. I cannot just say, we want to do a report on the Civic Hall, Mr Barclays or whoever, Abbey National, whoever, Santander I think they are now, please give me £150,000 because I want to do a report. It just doesn't work that way, I'm afraid. We have to find that money in advance. So I've tried to address as many of the points as possible. There is, as I said at the outset, an amendment that we take the consultation through to the 30th of January, which does give an extra period of time to get us over the Christmas and New Year period. Are there any other Cabinet members who wish to speak? No? In which case we will move to the vote. All those in favour of the recommendation as amended, please show. Okay, thank you very much. That is passed. The consultation will launch tomorrow and officers will be dealing with the finer details afterwards. If anyone wishes to, now the Civic Hall item is finished, if anyone wishes to leave, you're welcome to do so. I'll just give a break for anyone who wishes to leave. Right, I think everyone has left who was here for the Civic Hall, so we will continue with the agenda. That moves us on to agenda item number 7, which is the CRM system procurement. I believe that's you, Councillor Croft.
Yes, it is. Thank you very much, Leader. I shall try and be brief on all of my reports. I shall move the item which gives the relevant department the authority to renew the contract to replenish our customer relations management system, and it's deeply embedded in our council processes. We do need to replace this or continue the existing arrangement. It's within budget, but the cabinet needs to give approval because of the value. So I shall move the report, Leader.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Croft. Does that receive a seconder? Councillor Gutteridge, thank you. Any non-cabinet member? Councillor Condacor.
Just one sentence, really. I always worry about these content management systems that you get trapped into a supplier. So I do hope we've got an exit way to actually change supplier if the rates carry on going up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Condacor. Anything to come back on? No, in which case we'll move to the vote. All those in favour of the recommendations? Okay, that is carried. Thank you very much. That moves us on to agenda item 8, which is the sub-regional materials recycling facility. Councillor Markham.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This report seeks Cabinet's approval to recommend to Council that an additional loan be provided to Sherborne Recycling Limited to address the increased capital costs of constructing the sub-regional materials recycling facility as part of the authority's proportionate shareholdings. The Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council is one of 8 shareholder partners that committed to the development of the materials recycling site as part of its future recycling services. This facility supports a more efficient and environmental process for dry recycling materials. And due to the current economic market, inflation and exchange rates, the request for an additional loan continues to represent good value for money to the Council for its long-term recycling activities. The board of the Sherborne Recycling, which Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council is represented on, has been kept fully informed of developments as the project has progressed. Each partner has been asked to increase the capital drawdown facility it makes available to the project to cover the increased production costs. The additional capital budget allocation for Nuneaton and Bedworth is £233,784. So I ask that it be recommended to Council that an additional loan of £233,784 be made to Sherborne Recycling Limited to address the increased capital costs of constructing the sub-regional materials recycling facility, and that this be included in the medium-term financial strategy for payment in 2023-24. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Markham. I will second that from the Chair. Any non-cabinet member? Councillor Condacor.
This recycling facility is a marvellous idea. Having Coventry and Warwickshire having the same recycling factory, same materials, you can do education, loads of good stuff for it. But I'm really worried about this continuous asking for more and more money without having enough detail. If this is a really viable business, which I hope it is, it can borrow money itself. But it wants to borrow money from us, and it hasn't told us how long it wants to borrow it for or any details. If your mate says, I'll borrow 20 quid, you say, well, yeah, is it for the weekend or is it for a month? What I'd expect if they want even more borrowing from us is to say, we need to borrow this money and we will pay you back 20% next year, 20% the year after. So you've got a plan so that we can actually manage our borrowing. We've got horrendous levels of borrowing, as you'll see in later reports. We're looking at borrowing another 40 million somehow, either internally or on the markets. And we really do need to have a really tight grip on where we're giving more money away. Councils borrow cheaply, but there comes a point where councils become over-borrowed. And I don't want us getting into special measures because we've got a cash flow crisis. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Condacor. Anything that officers or members wish to come back on? No? I think that this is a really good value for money exercise. We know that once we have this facility up and running, it will reduce transport costs in terms of having to move our recyclate. It will also mean that we can move to commingled, as it will be able to do a whole array of recycling, which means instead of having residents have to use the caddy and the main body of the bin, which I don't think anyone actually really likes, to be fair. In my view, it's designed the wrong way around. You have more cardboard and paper than anything in my experience. But it would mean we could put everything in one and let the more automated systems run along with that. And it's important to note that this loan will be on a commercial basis, so they will be paying us interest on the loan that we actually give them. So there is a financial benefit to this council. And there will also be a financial benefit long term in that the cost of our recycling contract will actually be reduced, because we have to pay, and I'm going back in memory, but we have to pay a gate fee for every time that we take a vehicle to the drop-off point. Because it is a company which we own, or well, part own, we will actually be able to reduce the costs payable by this council. And there is also capacity there to go out on a commercial basis from this company to actually bring in additional business, and that be spread with the other constituent members of the business. So I think this makes sound financial sense. We have to recognise that everything has increased in costs, labour, materials, etc. And I think this is, given the size of the development, actually a relatively acceptable sum that we've actually had to come up with. So all those in favour of the recommendations, please show. Okay, that is carried. Thank you. That moves us on to the medium-term financial strategy. Councillor Croft.
Thank you very much, Leader. I shall move the item as promised. This is our medium-term financial strategy, which is to be followed by our medium-term financial plan with details as part of the budget process. This is effectively the higher level principles document, and it lays out the actual assumptions and principles that we'll be following in our budget process this year, hopefully in a more accessible way than it's been done in the past, with a particular emphasis on value for money for the taxpayer, shared services, maintaining prudential reserves. We've tried to lay out as fully as we can the cost pressures that we are going to have to face, at least at this high level, before we start crunching the proper numbers and publishing the properly crunched numbers as part of the budget process. So things such as the electoral commission, the insurance retender, that sort of thing. So the costs which are going to be unavoidable and have to be built in. The real headline figures are on page 13, which is the extension of the savings requirement into future years. We had forecast to balance the budget within 2 years back in February, but obviously with the deterioration in the inflationary situation and the world economy, that is no longer feasible, and we have to face that. So the savings requirement and the need for further income is their leader. We have tried to be as realistic as possible, because there is a tendency in government forecasts occasionally to be overly optimistic, and then you have to make adjustments in year, as we shall see later on. So we've tried to really be, I say realistic in terms of our income projections, whether or not we'll continue with certain government finance settlements. And I must say that the extension of the savings requirement really does demonstrate the need to retrench and focus on our core business, of which some of the more controversial items we've discussed recently, Leader, are not. So I shall move the report.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Croft. Does that receive a seconder? Councillor Markham, thank you. Any non-cabinet member? Councillor Condacor.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to ask, are you crazy, Councillor Croft? Because you want to borrow another £43 million. These vanity projects that are draining money from the budgets and meaning we have to make cuts across services that people love is to finance a lot of it, the borrowing. £43 million at the sort of rates we're looking at the moment with the public works bonds is £2 million of interest a year. Some of it will fall on the housing revenue account and some of it on the general fund. But we seriously need to look at how much we're borrowing on these vanity projects and how much these vanity projects are ruining our cash flow. You look at Abbey Street Car Park, that used to bring in £250,000 a year, and provide parking for all the businesses up the Queen's Road end of town. This vanity project has cut off that £250,000 income stream, and now you're going to have to pay interest on a £20 million, £24 million hotel, which by the time it's built will then only be worth 15 million because you'll have to devalue it. We really need to understand borrowing is not free money. The Conservatives keep on about being good at financial judgment, but we are over borrowing and we're building things that are just too big. A lot of people are against building a hotel. I'm for building a hotel, but one of a sensible size. Stockton did exactly the same as we did about 3.5 years ahead of us, and it clearly is a massive folly. Their £14 million hotel is now worth 9.9 million. We're doing exactly the same thing, and the people who are suffering are the people who need those public services, which you're going to cut to pay for the vanity projects. Thank you.
Anyone wish to come back on that? Councillor Croft.
Thank you very much, Leader. Well, then we do have to sort of, it's a rhetorical question, I know we can't come back. What would the councillor do? Because this borough is in serious need of redevelopment and regeneration. That's not going to come out of nowhere. And you can't just sort of sit around wishing things to be true. I mean, for example, he says that, I suppose the phrase I'm looking for, Mr. Chairman, sorry, Mr. Leader, is that you must speculate to accumulate. These things are capital investments. They are going to feed through in the decades to come in terms of returns to our local economy, so that in future years we don't have to make cuts, so that in future years we have more money available to us. But given that this evening the councillor has called for us to make sort of £250,000 subsidy to a theatre which is not making a profit and is not core business of this council, I question the priority. I think that jobs and economic development is the way to go. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Croft. I think basically what we heard was tantamount saying that people don't want regeneration in Nuneaton, and I don't think that is correct. When I have knocked on doors, and I've knocked on a fair few of them, they have said that they think that Nuneaton needs regenerating, just as they've said it in Bedworth, that they think that Bedworth needs regenerating, and that they are sad to see a once great town centre decline as it has over the past 20, 25, 30 years. And we need to do something now, not just to halt that decline. I don't want to be sat here just managing decline. I want to be sat here with a vision to actually improve things for the residents of Nuneaton and Bedworth. And let's not forget, it was the hotel company themselves who came to us saying that they wanted to build a hotel in Nuneaton because they believed it was a viable business proposition. And we have some fantastic connectivity here in Nuneaton and Bedworth. We are sat right at the heart of England here. We have great railway connectivity. We have great road connectivity. And there are a number of... Mr. Smith, please be quiet. We do have that connectivity, and there are a number of locations nearby where they do have high-level conferences, and they have not got the hotel capacity to host them. You've just got, I keep referring it to the Rico. I know it's not the Rico anymore, but we all know it as the Rico. That is literally just up the road, and they hold events, shows, conferences, etc., and we are just a stone's throw away from them. Why should we not make the most of our assets? And we have education wanting to come into the town centre. I don't think that is a bad thing at all. We need to be able to bring them in. We have the student pound, which could actually help a lot of our businesses within the town centre. We have new leisure facilities wanting to come into our town centre. So I think we've seen clearly tonight that it is only really this party, the Conservative Party in control, who is in favour of regenerating our town centres and actually building a better future rather than just managing decline. So I'm happy to go with the report in the medium-term financial strategy. All those in favour of the recommendations, please show. Thank you very much. That moves us on to agenda item number 10, which is a General Fund Budget Monitoring Quarter 2. Councillor Croft.
Leader. I'm frequently eccentric, but I've never been called crazy before. Right, we're really catching up with the financial reports now, Leader. This is the General Fund up to the end of September. The real headline is that we are still well adrift of budget in year for reasons that have been well rehearsed in previous meetings, and we've tried to lay them out in the appendix table. The deficit has reduced in year. It was north of £1 million at the last meeting when we presented the report. I think it was the last cabinet. It's now in the region of £930,000 deficit. That's as a result of the sort of more detailed reviews as we do the budget process as we get further through the year. So we do because the economic situation has deteriorated and because our incomings have deteriorated, we did say in the budget in February that we would have to review our market offering, and we've proposed revised market prices. So I will move that recommendation in the report, and it is trying to rationalise the system and move towards a more bespoke sort of self-service, what I will refer to as a self-assembly for the market trader service, which will be a less expensive option. So I shall move that recommendation, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Croft, and I'll second that from the Chair. Any non-Cabinet member? Councillor Condacourt.
Thank you. I'll be brief on this, but one thing that really confused me was the market pricing in Appendix 2. To hire your first stall, £30. Obviously, that might be a fair price or not a fair price. But to have 2 stalls is £62. So you're adding £32.50 for your second stall. That doesn't seem to make sense. But then to add your third stall, it's £76. So your third stall only costs £14. Surely, if we're going to actually encourage and have an efficient system, we should charge so much for your first stall, and then the increment should be fairly similar. Having this crazy one stall cost you so much, the next stall costs you even more, and then you get a cheap one, really doesn't seem to be that sensible. So maybe if we can have an explanation of that. And I'm quite keen that when we have empty stalls, I walked through the market today, there's a few no-shows, is we actually maybe have a standby or a sort of taster offer so that people who would like to get into market trading could take up a stall that was empty due to illness or holiday. And there's a barrier, putting out, particularly casual traders have to pay a lot more money for their stalls. So I think maybe actually trying to use some of that spare capacity when we have got empty stalls as a taster session might be a good thing we did. And I think Alan Hottie did that sort of thing way back in the days when we were an award-winning market. He really did try bringing new traders in. So I suggest that as a friendly thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Condacourt. Anyone wish to come back? No? Oh, Councillor Guttridge.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask, can I ask? No. Okay, I don't want to come back. Yes, it would be clarification. I'd like clarification on your proposed pricing of the market stalls, please.
Do you wish to come back?
Yeah, I'm very happy. I think £30 is a good price for the first stall, but then I'd probably have £20 or £25 work out for each additional one. So it's actually a linear system. I say the thing that sort of made it a bit strange is the second stall was even more than your first one. So I think it's £30 a stall and then £25 for each extra stall on that one. There's some proportion dearer. It doesn't have all these lumps in it, and what lumps do is they create anomalies.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Condacourt. Councillor Guttridge.
So you would charge more for 3 stores than we're proposing to charge?
If that's a question,
final time, Councillor Condacourt.
If that's a question, very slightly, but a lot less for the second stall, so it would help. Thank you.
Any other member? No. In which case we'll move to the recommendations. All those in favour, please show. Okay, thank you very much. That moves us on to agenda item number 11, which is the Q2 Housing Revenue Account Budget Monitoring. Councillor Croft.
Thank you very much, Leader. This is the same report for the HRA over the same time period. This, on the face of it, appears more positive because the in-year deficit has reduced from about £500,000 at the last report to around £64,000. That is largely due to vacancy savings and staff costs, so the pay award hasn't stung us as badly. We do need to bear in mind that we do still have the real inflationary and financial pressures affecting our projects. That is still there, but it is positive that we're getting closer to the zero on the budget figure that we'd forecast at the start of the year. So I shall move that report, Leader.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Croft. Does that receive a seconder? Councillor Smith, thank you. Any non-cabinet member? Councillor Condacor.
Yet again, and I've raised this with Councillor Guttridge when we had a chat the other day, is the underspending on the housing. Some of it is down to not doing the grounds maintenance, and it's not Councillor Guttridge's responsibility because it's housing. But I think when we do underspend, we do need to actually look if we're actually doing the job properly. And particularly leaseholders are getting particularly annoyed at the state of place at Cleaver Gardens, whereas lots of beds haven't been sorted out from when the beds were taken out from being bushes. So I think when we look at this so-called underspend and spare money, we do actually need to make sure we're doing the job properly for our tenants, and the issues that are raised are actually sorted out. Because effectively they're a deficit. If a tenant has paid for the grounds maintenance in their lease and we aren't doing it up to spec, they should be getting a refund, or we should be having that on our accounts as actually work owing to our tenants. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Condacor. Any member wish to come back in? No. The only thing I would highlight, Councillor Condacor, is that we do know there is a particular problem in the HRA properties where we do try and gain access on the grounds maintenance, and there are residents or tenants, cars, vans, etc. in the way, so we can't get in, and we can't just keep rescheduling things at a time to suit their convenience. They shouldn't be blocking these accesses in the first place. So I accept there may be issues on our side, that is entirely possible, but tenants and residents do have their part to play in this as well. All those in favour of the recommendations, please show. Thank you very much. That moves us on to agenda item number 12, which is the Capital Monitoring Quarter 2 report. Councillor Croft.
Thank you very much, Leader. This is breakdown of our capital progress this year. Really, the headline figures on this is that we are very much underspent on the capital programme, despite all the noise and fury. We're 7 million underspent on the general fund and about 4.5 million underspent on the HRA. That's due to several factors. We've tried to lay out the specific reasoning behind the specific projects in the appendix, partly officer capacity and partly the economic situation affecting prices. So, for example, we are trying to value engineer the Bedworth Physical Activity Hub project. It is an ambitious programme. We always knew it was an ambitious programme, but as I say, there isn't much alternative if the towns are to be revived and saved. So I shall move the report, Leader.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Croft. Does that receive a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Smith. Any non-cabinet member? Councillor Condacor.
Underspent on the capital programme can be one of two things. Things are either cheaper or you delaying the work till next year. And next year, what might be £4 million project might be a £5 million project. And the problem we've got in this report is it's only showing this in year, and the things that are getting knocked over to next year we're not seeing. At the county council, they do a nice massive spreadsheet with the capital programme, and you see things moving from a square in, say, 2022-3 into the next square, but you can see if the figures have actually gone up or if they're just moved between years. And I think it would be very useful if Councillor Croft could produce that sort of report in future, so we can actually know when we need to be worried about things becoming more expensive, or whether we can actually just be happy we don't need to borrow the money quite so early. The other issue, of course, is unlike the Appendix 1, we got Abbey Street regeneration, £21.7 million. We don't know what the total cost of that is because, like the county, we don't have this year and next year. So we don't have visibility. And also on those lines, like the hotel is not the whole of Abbey Street Part 1 because there's other things that are in that sort of grouped in with preparatory works, etc. So it's very hard to visualise what's going on. And some projects, like I keep mentioning 196 Church Road, Stocking Forward, are hidden in the figures because there's not an explicit single project. and there are things we need to monitor because they're the sort of project that gets more and more expensive. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Condicle. Anyone wish to come back? Councillor Croft.
Very briefly, Councillor Condicle, we're very pleased when we finally, and we are getting there, I think, we finally start budgeting for capital projects and capital programmes and reporting on them over multiple years in the documents. It is coming down the track, but you know, it's, we're trying to do one thing at a time.
Okay, thank you. Any other Cabinet member? No, in which case we'll move to the vote on the recommendations. All those in favour? Thank you very much. That moves us on to agenda item number 13, which is the Q2 Treasury Management Report Mid-Year Review. Councillor Croft.
Thank you very much, Leader. One of the more exciting ones. This is, as you say, it's the mid-year review of the Treasury position. It gives a pretty comprehensive summary of the economic situation in the country to date, although it is, we have once again changed government, I noticed, compared to the narrative report. The headline, I suppose, on page 38, just to emphasise, is that while the capital programme has increased, that is partly due to grants and receipts. The capital financing requirement has remained steady, and I would just like to reassure the Councillor after his comments earlier, and this is a frequent topic of conversation between the Finance Director and I, that we do not have a cash flow problem. The cash is in the bank. We are quite capable to meet our commitments and our bills. So I shall move the report.
Thank you, Councillor Croft. Does that receive a seconder? Councillor Gutteridge, thank you. We have one public speaker on this agenda item, Mr. Smith.
Right. I think this part of the agenda sums up everything that's wrong with corporate politics when a small group of morally, intellectually and spiritually bankrupt people are allowed to dump debt on other people's back with no responsibility taken for any of the spending. Shocking. And that's what's wrong with this country. Basically, a small group of corporate politicians have made up a system where you can fund your living off the backs of other people's hard work and you don't mind doing it. Yeah? It's shocking you lot. Not just you lot, Parliament, all corporate politicians. Yeah? This bit sums it up more than ever, and your attitude to the people here tonight, earlier, and as ever, yeah, you're the gift that keeps giving. Every time you just open your mouth, yeah, and people watch this, you're the gift that keeps giving. You know what I mean? So I can't stand any more of this tonight, but you are the problem that this borough has, yeah, and hopefully you'll all be gone soon. Thank you very much.
Any non-Cabinet member? No, in which case we'll return to sanity. Any other Cabinet member wish to speak? No, in which case we'll move to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much.
Shut the door on your way out, please.
Right, that moves us on to agenda item number 14, which is updates to text and data amendments to the local development scheme. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Leader. This report provides information to update Cabinet on the local development scheme, otherwise known locally as the Borough Plan Review, and the Gypsy and Traveller Development Plan Document, or DPD. With the timeframes that need to be amended to bring them into line with current working position. The published timeframe indicates that the publication version of the Borough Plan Review, which is the next stage of the plan-making process, should have gone out to consultation in October and subsequently be submitted to the Secretary of State in February 23. For various reasons, which I will outline, but is fully explained in the report, it's recommended that the publication stage is now delayed until April 2023, This will then ultimately have a knock-on effect to the submission to the Secretary of State. The main reason for the delay is due to the late publication of the Sub-Regional Housing and Economic Development Needs Assessment, or HEDNA, which is currently being updated to reflect the outputs of the 2021 census. This key document will project the housing and employment land requirement for the borough up to 2039 and forms a platform on which all our supporting evidence-based documents are built. We can also not begin discussions with our local authority partners to satisfy our duty to cooperate until we have numbers to base our discussions on. In terms of the Gypsy and Traveller Development Plan document, it was previously predicted that this would be submitted to the Secretary of State in July 22, which would lead to the examination in public in November or December of this year, with a subsequent adoption in 2023. In reality, the document was submitted earlier than scheduled in June, and the public examination hearing was actually carried out by a planning inspector a couple of weeks ago. I'm therefore hopeful that this could potentially bring the adoption forwards if the plan is considered sound by the planning inspector. I'm happy to propose a recommendation as printed that the amendments to the local development scheme be noted and it be recommended to Council that the amendments to the local development scheme be approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Does that receive a seconder? Councillor Markham, thank you. Any non-cabinet member? Councillor Condacall.
Chair, the Conservative group have run the council now for about 18 months. And looking on the proposed timetable for the Borough Plan Review, it was originally going to be February 2023 for us having a new Borough Plan. That is now June 2024, which on my reckoning looks like it's gone back 16 months. So in your 18 months in charge, you've effectively put the plan back 14 months. That is like we had in the Labour days. I was actually hoping one of the things the new administration would do would actually be get us on and get a new plan, because we desperately need one to protect some of our green areas from overdevelopment. And I'm also very concerned about the HEDNA, because we had a massive amount of house building in the last couple of years, and what we're doing with these HEDNAs is predicting that spike of house building to go on forever. That is clearly not sustainable and not the right thing to do. We have economic cycles. Us older people remember negative equity, recessions, good years, booms, busts, dot-coms, whatever. The HEDNA has to be based upon a realistic future for the next 15 to 20 years. And the way it's going, it is going to predict and provide ridiculous amounts of additional housing on top of the 14,000, which means we're going to have maybe 20,000 more homes in the borough, according to the plans. And we're going to lose so much more countryside and still fail to have the infrastructure needed. So I'm very disappointed by your group and the lack of progress, and I'm very disappointed that your promises to reduce the housing numbers will actually mean eventually you'll increase them by maybe another 6,000 to 7,000, as the new HEDNA is based upon massive growth. Thank you, Chair.
Any cabinet member wish to come back? No, again, just to give some actual reality to the situation, Councillor Condacall knows full well there have been staffing issues within the planning department, some of which I do believe he is potentially exasperated because of the comments he makes about this council being unfit and that we're forcing officers out and it's not a nice environment to work in. The reason it becomes not a nice environment to work in is precisely because of the comments of Councillor Condacall. Now, that has unfortunately meant that there have been some unavoidable delays. There have also been a number of reports which we know need to be updated. Is he seriously suggesting that we submit a revised borough plan where the evidence is not up to date? It would be thrown out immediately, summarily. We would be laughed out by the inspector. We already knew that some of the evidence that went to the previous inspector was at the end of its shelf life, not to mention using it again. And I think it is a complete missell of what we have done since we took control 18 months ago. Within a few months, we had a consultation. Labour, when they were in control, had no consultation in the remaining 2 years they had from the adoption of their borough plan to now. We have put in an extra step of consultation, which Labour would never have done, so that we can enable residents to have their say. And what we are doing is making sure that we have a sound borough plan. And actually, he is incorrect about the housing numbers, because when you look at the fact that this chops off a significant proportion of the old borough plan from that period of time, it adjusts the number of houses in that period of time and moves forwards. So it actually does see a reduction. He knows that, but he is deliberately misleading residents to suit his green agenda. So we will take no lessons in sound management of the planning department from him. So I would like to have seen it done earlier, but I recognise the hard work which has gone in by the cabinet member and the officers concerned. So whilst it's not a brilliant report, it is an understandable report given the climate we are in. So I'm happy to move to the recommendations as printed. Everyone please show in favour. Thank you very much. That moves us on to agenda item 15, which is recommendations from overview and scrutiny panels. There are none. Item 16, any other items? There is another item which was circulated recently. I just find it now. This was only brought to our attention last week following a meeting, so I asked for it to come to Cabinet, because I thought it was an important document to come to Cabinet actually, because it does show that Nuneaton is being looked at as a place for additional infrastructure investment in the rail network, and that they are looking at, as part of the West Midlands Rail consultation, a potential 2 extra stops in the Nuneaton area, which probably are overdue given the amount of development we have had over the past 10 years in Nuneaton, particularly Nuneaton East, which would lead to a Nuneaton East Parkway, and also one in Galley Common. And whilst it is only an indication that we are being looked at, I think it is a welcome first step to recognise that Nuneaton and Bedworth is on the map and that we play a central part in the rail network given our geographical location I mentioned earlier. So I would like us to submit a consultation response, which is why I've asked for it to come to Cabinet to approve a consultation response, so that it is delegated to myself and the Deputy Chief Executive, sorry, I'm not adding to your burden, sorry, Mr Chief Executive, to the Deputy Chief Executive to compose a supportive response on behalf of Nuneaton and Bedworth. So does that receive a seconder? Councillor Gutteridge, thank you. Any non-cabinet member? Councillor Condacourt.
Thank you. I'm surprised you've only just learned of this consultation, because I responded to it actually probably the day it came out, about 10 days ago or so. It is really, really interesting what they're proposing, and the proposals for Stocking Ford Station, which they keep calling Galley Common, are really, really going to be very positive. I was a county councillor for 8 years, and I moaned continuously during those 8 years about Stocking Ford Station, because the Western Nuneaton is really badly cut off in terms of public transport. If you go to Birmingham from the Stocking Ford, you get into Nuneaton on an expensive bus, and then you go past back your home on an expensive train. So a Stocking Ford Station is going to be incredibly good. The business case that the County Council did for it was outstanding, because unlike a station at the end of the line, Stocking Ford Station, the trains fill up going to Birmingham or fill up going to Nuneaton and Hinckley. So it is an we should have had it years ago, and we should be screaming how good it is, and we should be screaming that it's Stocking Ford, because it is going to be built in Stocking Ford near the old station, not in Galley Common, and we're not Ryanair. We don't want people arriving at Stocking Ford or Galley Common and getting confused. Stocking Ford Station is going to be at Stocking Ford. Nuneaton East, that's a different matter. This Parkway station is proposed to be built on the A5 near the railway bridge that keeps getting hit. It's an absolutely stupid location to get to from Nuneaton. And effectively what the idea of that station was is that when they build the bypass lines, so Coventry to Leicester to Nottingham trains can bypass the Nuneaton station and whiz straight through, they still wanted to pick up the car users. So you'd have to drive up past Dodwells, Longshoot Dodwells, onto the A5 to pick the train up there. And that Parkway station would actually detract from the number of trains stopping at Nuneaton and Hinckley. Absolutely nuts because it's so hard to get to. And who wants to go onto the A5 to get a train? Once you've got to past Dodwells, you might as well drive to Leicester. And you're not going to go that way to get a train to Coventry. If we do have a Parkway station or an East station, it has to be on Eastborough Way. Anything else is an absolute loss to the town. And the way they're pushing this Nuneaton bypass, Midlands Connect, is going to be a massive detriment to Nuneaton. We got bypassed by the West Coast Main Line when it got improved. We lost our Liverpool service. And this Parkway station has a big threat of losing services at Nuneaton. We'll only have the local stopping services. And the fast trains will actually end up stopping at the Parkway. So I'm really strongly against the Parkway station, particularly it being based on the A5, because it is a nuts location. It has 0 bus services, 0 cycling lanes, and it is a hellish place to drive to. Yeah, we don't want people to have cars to be able to get a train. We need these stations to be in Stockingford, in St Nicholas Ward. Yeah, the Bermuda station is starting to pick up. These stations are important to us, but we need them in the right place. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Condacore. Any member wish to come in? No? In which case I'll move to the vote. All those in favour of the recommendations, please show. Okay, thank you very much. That moves us on to agenda item number 17, which is the exclusion of the public and press under the relevant provisions of the Local Government Act 1972. I will move those from the chair. Does that receive a seconder? Oh, I've got 2, Councillor Croft and Councillor Markham. All those in favour, please show. Okay, that is carried, thank you. So can we end the live stream now, please, Kelly? No.